Olli Virtanen is a Finnish musician who is touring now in Germany with the Simon Bremen quartet, and he comes from Helsinki and actually in Bietigheim-Bissingen in the province of Baden-Württemberg, Germany. What was your motivation to be a jazz musician, and why you chose vibraphone as your instrument?
So I started out with classical percussion when I was young. My parents are both classical musicians. So my father used to play the cello and my mother used to play the piano. Nowadays they more deal with the teaching side of music. So my mother teaches music pedagogy and my father teaches music theory and music history, and is the head of this Sibelius edition in Helsinki, which studies the works of Jean Sibelius. And I started out with classical percussion, and my brother played classical contrabass. And it was probably when I was around 17 or 18, so in high school actually is when I started playing jazz. So pretty late, I was in this Sibelius high school in Finland, and there were a lot of people who were interested in jazz music, and that's how I kind of heard it for the first time, and I was immediately hooked on the music. And since I played classical percussion, I played quite a bit of marimba and quite a bit of vibraphone pieces, like solo pieces, and also in some youth orchestras in Helsinki. And it was a logical step for me. I chose to study the vibraphone and kind of melodic jazz playing instead of starting to play drums, because I was interested in the harmonic side of jazz music as well, instead of only playing the rhythmic side, which I of course am also interested in.
How is the jazz scene in Finland? From Finland, mostly the folk music or the metal is known outside the country, but how is the jazz scene there, and what are the jazz traditions of the country?
I think it's very interesting because Finland actually has a really, really high level jazz scene. There are really so many amazing jazz musicians. And I suggest anyone who listens to this interview to check out some of those musicians that play and are from Finland. And the scene, I would say, it's quite traditional. It's where I study in Sibelius Academy. It's a really high level, straight ahead. So from bebop to the 60s and maybe a bit forward from that, but that's kind of the stuff we study. So I would say the biggest people, the people we study the most at Sibelius Academy are people like Herbie Hancock and Freddie Hubbard and Wayne Shorter and people like these who played in the 60s, kind of this step more modern stuff from the straight ahead, from the hard rock of the 50s. But of course we also study bebop playing, and that's kind of the basis to get into the school, is that you have to be able to play bebop pretty well. So I would say it's a pretty traditional scene and pretty like traditional scene, but it's really, really high level jazz scene. And of course there are some people who also play different kinds of jazz, so like more ECM and Nordic jazz. But I would say it's everyone's playing is definitely influenced by the high level of straight ahead jazz playing in Finland.
Now you're playing the German province. How you came here? How you got in contact with the Simon Bremen quartet, and in which places have you been playing now outside here, Bietigheim-Bissingen, which other places?
So I met Simon when he started his exchange year in Helsinki, in Sibelius Academy, and we played quite a bit together. We had some of the same classes in the school, and also we played a lot of jam sessions together. And then he asked me to play on his record, which is coming out, I think, on the 9th of March, if I'm not mistaken. And we recorded it in Kunkula in Helsinki. And after the summer, he said that he's organizing a small tour here in Germany, and asked me if I could come play, and I said sure. And we played one gig in Weimar, then we played in Dresden, and then Stuttgart, and today here in, what is this place called? Bietigheim. What is this?
Yeah, Bietigheim-Bissingen.
Bietigheim-Bissingen, yeah. And tomorrow in Reutlingen, I think.
Reutlingen.
Yeah. So we have 5 gigs this week, and I'm only here for a week, so yeah. But let's see if there's more tours to come. I'm happy to play some more. It's amazing music, I think.
Is the jazz audience in Finland and in Germany different, or the same mindset people are interested in jazz, or how you find the public, the audience in the different countries where you play at?
I think the audience is definitely a lot smaller in Finland, so there's not so many gigs to play, and there are not nearly as many jazz clubs in Finland. And it's a shame, I think, because I think there is definitely a demand for it, maybe because, for an example, in some of the jam sessions, the house is always packed full of people, and I think there could be a large interest in jazz music in Finland. And of course, because the level is so high, the jazz music is really, really good in Finland. So I think it would be nice to have more venues to play at and more gigs offered. But sadly, that's not the case, and it's a very small scene, but it's a very high level scene.
During the last few years, it was just very rarely possible to make live events because of the border controls, border closures, and the COVID-based regulations generally. What have you been doing during this time, and how you spent this time?
Well, I got lucky in a way that I could live at my parents' place at that time. I was studying at this other school in Helsinki, Pop and Jazz Conservatory, which is another rhythm music school in Helsinki. And I was living with my parents, so I could practice at my parents' place because they're also musicians, and we have a grand piano and stuff like this, so I could practice there. I practiced a lot, and I composed music and just studied music in general. And after the COVID year, I got accepted to the Sibelius Academy Jazz department. So I got really lucky in that way that of course I didn't play any gigs in that time, and that sucked in a way, but I could organize sessions at my parents' place and play music with people there and stuff like this. And I was also still a student in the Helsinki Pop and Jazz Conservatory, so I got like the student things that students gets. I could also go to the school and play sessions there and stuff like this.
What is the inspiration of your own songs?
Well, I take a lot of inspirations from the old jazz masters. I would say that my style is based a lot on the 60s jazz music. So I would say my biggest inspirations are people like Wayne Shorter, Freddie Hubbard, Herbie Hancock, Kenny Kirkland, and then some of the Finnish jazz musicians like Jukki Suotila, who is an amazing drummer and piano player. And people like these, I listen to a lot of their music and take inspiration from their works.
What are your plans for the future?
Well, I'm actually recording my debut record in the beginning of March. It's going to be with a jazz septet, so there's going to be 4 horns. There's going to be trombone, tenor saxophone, flute, and what do I miss? Trumpet on the record. And I'll play vibraphone and piano on it, and that's a really big thing for me. It's going to be only my original music. Actually, some of the tunes we played today, all 3 of my tunes, they're going to be on that record, and I'll arrange them for the horns and the bigger band. So that's kind of my short-term goal right now, to get that record done and make it as good as I can. And then after that, I will work on some other projects I have in mind with other bands.
In your early childhood, you raised up in Suomenlinna, the very famous and beautiful fortress island of Helsinki. How was that venue for a live for life. How was it? How were the everydays there? As of it is very crowded with tourists, and it's one of the most important sightseeing points of Helsinki.
Yeah.
So how was it to live there in Suomenlinna?
It was very nice as a young kid. You could just imagine there's like these huge fortress walls and climbing on them and playing around in the old castle ruins. It was amazing, and it's a really idyllic place, and I still go there a lot. I just love that place. It has a really its own vibe in a way. It's a very, very beautiful and special place for me to go to, and I really, for me, I think it's the best. For me, it was like the best place to grow up as a kid. But of course, it's like a very secluded place too. There's not a lot of kids, so there's actually a school on the island too, and I went there, and there were 70 of us in the whole school. So not a lot of people who live there. So it's a really tight community, but also very small. So it was kind of a shock to move to the city and go to bigger school in the city, but that worked out too, and of course, but it was a really nice place to grow up.
How is the current cultural politics in Finland? Were there, for example, any kind of help from the state for the music and generally the art scene who couldn't play at concerts, and were there some projects by the government, either from the nationwide or from the provincial government, to help the artists somehow, and also to give possibilities to still be active as an artist during the COVID-restricted times?
Well, it's kind of sad. I mean, there were some, and well, definitely less than in other countries. And the sad thing is that it was not really well like shared. So people who actually needed the money often didn't get the money at all. So it was very poorly distributed, and it often got stuck on these higher levels and never actually got down to the freelance musicians who actually need the money. So it got stuck in these organizations and for people who didn't really need the money. So it was actually really bad for a lot of freelance musicians. And I know a lot of my friends who played a lot of gigs and did a lot of stuff with music who had to start doing something completely different because of how little they got help from the government. But of course they did give some money, but it was I don't think it was anywhere near enough, and the way they did it, I think wasn't it was really bad for the freelance musicians in Finland.
And how is the inter-Scandinavian cooperation in the jazz scene? Because of the Nordic cooperation is quite famous about being well organized and having many kinds of fields of cooperation, also in the arts. Have you been, for example, participating at some music projects which were part of Nordic cooperation with the other Scandinavian countries?
Well, I personally haven't, but there's, for an example, there's this Nordic Jazz Master program, so you can study your master's degree going to the different Nordic countries, to the different cities. I think it's Copenhagen and Oslo and Helsinki and perhaps also Stockholm. Yeah, definitely also Stockholm. And we just had Nordic Jazz Master students this year in Helsinki. But I don't actually know how much there is. I definitely know that people play with people from Copenhagen and Stockholm and Oslo and stuff like this, but I don't know how much there is actually interchange between the Nordic countries. There is some, of course, but not maybe as much as there could be.